Welcome everybody to My Life, My Business. Wish I was here, and as usual, we are exploring topics that help us live an engaged life that we can fully enjoy and appreciate and be energized when we wake up in the morning to just contemplate what it is we're going to achieve for the day. But anyway, enough of all of that. This afternoon, Shanaaz is going to take us through a topic of her choice, and as usual, we can't wait. So, Shanaaz, welcome to you. Over to you.
Thank you. Sure. That was like, okay, I know that was my cue. Right. So, this afternoon, I'm going to be talking about the neuroscience of fear. And I was really inspired by Jacques, your talk last week on the chapter that you were going to write about, getting back on the bike after you had that accident, and kind of all the things that you needed to go through, and yeah, just in terms of facing the fear, and how you felt about sort of being able to get on the bike, and the obstacles that you needed to face, the limiting beliefs, but also comments about people, and really what you were describing was actually some of the um, tools, in a sense, that one needs to go through when you're experiencing fear. And so it's really interesting that one of the biggest things that people come to me about, when they come and see me, is actually has to do with fear. Whether it's fear of a relationship, fear of moving on, fear of an exam. I've had a number of young people, and in my work, this fear and anxiety around exams and their future. So I have to deal with a lot of, I have to deal a lot with people and their fears. In addition, you also have your own fears. So I find it really interesting. And because I'm quite interested in the brain and how it works, and how that affects us, in a, both a positive way and, sometimes not so positive ways. But what I often kind of like to give is that I'd like people to have some of this knowledge that I wish I could have been taught some of these things in high school, because you don't have to be, a scientist or a therapist or a psychologist to actually know these things. So I'd like to give people some tips and, techniques around addressing some of your fears that can be debilitating. For example, um, I've been in talking to a young lady who was involved in a car accident, and so she's been having panic attacks. And driving is part of her work. She's got to get to work, and she's got to go and see clients, etc. So that's, it's been really affecting her job and how she feels about herself. So experiencing fears like that can actually affect your lifestyle. It can affect your mental health. So it's really a key way to kind of managing your life is about managing your fears. And I hope that the talk today, just to inform you a little bit about how the brain works, is actually going to help. So the fear center of the brain is called the amygdala, and I like to refer to it as the alarm system of the brain. So if you think of the fire alarm, then you need to think of the amygdala being that alarm going off. But before we kind of get started, I wanted to imagine the brain. So the easiest way, when I'm talking to people about the brain, I want them to know that we actually have three brains, in a sense, right? And whether you believe in evolution or not, it doesn't have to be part of it, but we've got three brains. And so when So I'd like you to put your fist, hold your hand in a fist. So when you're looking at your hand in a fist, what you'll see is the wrist part joining your hand. And that area, if you think of that as the brain stem, then where your fingers are, because it's folded and it's inside the palm of your hand, if you can think of that as sort of the middle brain, or the what we call the mammalian brain. And then you find the outer part where your knuckles are, and that can be called the that is really the rational brain, or they sometimes refer to it as the prefrontal cortex. So I'm going to explain to you a little bit about what these the functions of these different parts do, and then where the fear comes in. So the brain stem, or the ancient, I sometimes call it the ancient brain, really is that is responsible. So apparently, if you believe in how we've developed as humans, they say this is the part that is instinctive, this is the part that apparently we sort of have in common with our invertebrates, and non-human, the animals, right? So it's instinctive behavior, but it also functions, is responsible for activating our hunger, our breathing, circulation, temperature, movement, posture, also territorial, and then also our fight or flight mechanism. So my mom had actually a brainstem stroke, and what actually then happened to her was that amazingly all these parts of her body was affected, in terms of sometimes breathing, even temperature. It would be like very warm and she'd be freezing cold. So now you can see that part of the brain. But for us dealing with fear, the interesting part, in a sense, of this is around breathing, and is around fight or flight. Because what happens is that is forms part of the fear center of the brain. Then, so that's the first part, the brain. Then we go to the next part of the brain, is called, you can think of the middle brain, or the mammalian brain, right? So remember I said to you, so the think of the stem, if you're holding your hand in the fist, the brain stem is the wrist part connecting to your hand. Then the inner part, the inner or the middle brain, in a sense, is there where your tips of your fingers are, in terms of the palm of your hand. So that is the mammalian brain. This part of the brain, or the middle part of the brain, activates rage, fear. So this is where the fear is activated in our brains. It also is that part of the brain is responsible for separation, for distress, for bonding, for playfulness, for caring and nurturing, and the sex drive in adults. Then the final part, and this is apparently how the brain evolved, is the rational brain. So as you're holding your hand in the fist shape, so think of the outward part, the knuckle part. So the rational part of the rational brain, as you can imagine with the name, the rational brain, that is really responsible for our creativity, imagination, problem solving, reasoning, and reflection. Also self-awareness, kindness, and empathy. And interestingly, that part of our brain can has led to us as humans, our greatest achievements. But when it's cut off, actually, from the other parts of the brain, they say, like the emotional part of the brain, or the mammalian brain that I spoke of, the middle brain, then actually we can create, the humans can create the greatest cruelty and do the big damage. So all three parts are really important, and all three parts feature in the fear center. So the fear, as I said, what then happens then? So when you automatically, your brain is there to protect yourself, the alarm system. So when you have had an accident, what is happening is that your alarm system in your brain will go off, and it will store memories of whatever you're experiencing, that fear, that trauma. It will store it in the middle part of the brain, right? The other thing about it is that what tends to happen is that When you experience fear, what will happen? It activates the fight or flight center of the brainstem. It will also activate the stress hormone cortisol, right? And that then will, what that will do is, it will cause you to be on high alert. Your adrenaline will be, through the roof. You'll be scanning. In other words, it also then will activate it. You have the flight being activated, or fight or flight being activated, and you have these hormones, the stress hormones being activated. What does that tell you? That actually tells you that the amygdala, the brain's alarm system, has hijacked your brain, right? So because now it's controlling fight or flight, it's controlling freeze, it's controlling your breathing. What then actually happens is that it, because it hijacks the brain, what it does, which is amazing actually, is it prevents you from thinking rationally. That part of the brain, it actually looks like a walnut. It's two small walnuts. That part of the brain, the other thing about that part of the brain, the amygdala, is that it cannot tell time and it cannot differentiate in spatial differences. So, what does that mean for our fears? That means the fact that we call it asynchronous, right? The fact that it can't tell time means that fear can remain with you for a long time, right? Because what will happen is that your brain and your body, in terms of the memories that it stores around the fear, is that it will not recognize that the accident happened 3 years ago. You will still have the same response, particularly when you see the area that you've perhaps had the accident in. This is, of course, if you haven't dealt with your fears. So, what will happen is, if you think of an accident, so each time you drive past that particular area where you've had an accident, the memories of that will start coming back. What then happens is, because that part of the brain, the alarm system will go off. Because you've alerted the alarm system of your brain, what will happen is your breathing will become shallow, adrenaline will start shooting through your brain. And for some people, they have a panic attack even. But even though the accident may have happened 3 years, 3 weeks ago, because that part of the brain cannot tell time. So that explains why some of us, we have these physiological reactions to something that, happened a while ago. The other thing about that, in terms of it can't tell spatial differences, it means that if there is something similar, right? So I'll give you an example. It will not tell the difference if you were, say, attacked by an animal, right? Hopefully not. Or you've gone, you've been attacked. Or let's use the animal particularly. If you've been attacked by an animal, um, and you see a furry animal, like a toy, your first reaction will actually not be, oh, this is a toy. Your first reaction will be, you will get afraid, you will, have a bit of a scare, because that part of the brain can't tell the difference between what is real, in a sense, and what is not real. The spatial differences, the time differences. So, what does this all mean then for managing our fear? What this means is that we actually need to short circuit the amygdala, right? We need to stop it then, and we need to stop it so that we can engage the rational part of our brain, right? Where we are reflecting and thinking, oh, but I still want to, I still need to see my clients. I still need this job. I still need to drive. I have these goals that I want to achieve. And you know what? This accident happened then. So I need to get into this car and I need to drive past you again. Or in your case, Jacques, I need to get on the bike. But what happens if we don't address our fears, and if we don't, in a sense, short circuit our amygdala? What will happen is we will continue to have those fears, and if you did not address it, you would not have gotten onto the bike again. And this is all about being able to get back onto the bike. And so what happens is that we store information in this very fear centered part. We also store information and memories around what we see, what we hear, and what we felt. And that in that area, the memories are then stored. And so that is why when you walk past this area where the accident happened, if you haven't addressed your fears, when anything reminds you, a memory is triggered of that accident, you may go into the same kind of physiological experiences, right? So what this means is that we, like I said, we need to stop we need to short circuit the amygdala, and there are a few things that you can do, whether your fear, because we all fear, right? Some of us may fear an exam. I'm currently busy with some young people and their fear of exam. I know someone who is at the moment is fearful of doing his driver's test. He's failed so many times, so he's just been avoiding it, right? And so what tends to, because the feelings of anxiety and feeling frozen and fear just become so overwhelming to them that, as I said, the brain kind of, the amygdala, the alarm system of the brain goes off and it hijacks the entire brain. And you want to be able to use your rational part of the brain to reflect, to achieve, to problem solve and think creatively. So how can we do that? There are grounding techniques that I am going to go through that can help us deal with this, whether it's a little fear or phobia of say I'm trying to spiders, or whether it is a massive, a big fear goes on a continuum. So but it can be a tiny phobia or it can be something big, and you can use this whether it's fear of exam, fear of the future. So grounding techniques, what are grounding techniques? Grounding techniques, what they do is it helps to control the symptoms by turning our attention away from those thoughts, memories, or fears, and refocusing it on the present moment. What grounding techniques then do is switch off your alarm system that's going off in your brain. So let's look at some of the examples of grounding techniques, right? Or some of the things that you can do. So the first thing that I suggest to people is breathing. So I call it this a 3-4 breathing. So what you'll notice is, remember I said the brain stem is responsible for breathing. So now you're going to start working with that. So with breathing, you always breathe out when you're doing some breathing work. It doesn't even have to be long. No one has to see you even do this. You can sit and do it in the car, right? So what you want to do is you want to breathe in for shorter than what you're breathing out. So I suggest breathe in for 3 seconds and breathe out for 4 seconds. And you need to repeat this 3 or 4 times. What you will do is you will slowly start to make the amygdala, you'll start to switch it off just because you're breathing, and you are working, literally doing brain surgery with yourself by calming down your amygdala and switching it off. So breathing is one of the things. Another idea or technique that we do, it's called 5 4 3 2 1. So what this is, it helps you to focus on your surroundings, focus purposefully on the surroundings. What this again does is, the amygdala is responsible for storing memories of your fears. So by focusing it And by switching the amygdala off and your fear center off, how we switch it off is by focusing on our surroundings and by using our our senses to do this. So the 5 4 3 2 1 technique, what this does is, what you need to do is, what are the 5 things you can see in your environment, right? So you'll scan it around. It can be, you can do it while you're kind of sitting in your car or even while you're walking somewhere. So you want to look for small details, the car in front of you. You want to notice if you're in the car, obviously you can't be looking behind you. So, but you want to see and look at 5 things. Can be the trees, it can be the color of the car next door, or it can be if you're sitting in a room, it can be 5 things or objects that you've seen, or notice something that you haven't seen. So that's 5. With 4, it's 4 things that you can feel. So this is not necessarily emotional feelings, but this is actually feelings of, I can feel my jersey that I'm wearing on me. I can feel the phone in my hand that I'm holding. I can feel the warm cup of coffee. I can feel the cold drink. So, so you want to feel for weight. This is heavy. You want to feel for texture and other physical qualities of feeling. You want to feel the rough texture of, your jersey or your jacket or your bag or your suitcase, etc. So it's those. So you started off with 5 things that you can see, then 4 things that you can feel. The next thing is 3 things that you can hear, right? So, pay special attention to the sounds that you can hear. Just 3 sounds that you can hear around you, right? So we're going 5 4 3 2. 2 things that you can smell. Maybe you can smell, a deodorant, or you can smell the car seats, or you can smell, and a candle, an aromatic candle or something like that. So you want to focus on 2 things that you can smell. And then the last thing is something that you can taste, right? So maybe you've got a sweet nearby, you've got something, a fruit, and you can taste it. And literally that is 5 4 3 2 1. So 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. What that again does is that it taps into the fear system and it switches off your alarm, your fear alarm. And I've done these things myself, and they really do work. They also work for feelings of anxiety. So maybe you're just really nervous about, going to speak in front of a large group of people. This is something that you can do. And then one of the other things that you can do is things like, I do this. Actually, it's called categories. So you want to think of as many of things of 3 categories. So, for example, movies. There's a list of things that I've got here: movies, countries, or books. So, I use movies. So I will start to think of as many of my favorite movies I can think of. Maybe you want to think of as many countries as you want to think of. There's sports teams, there's animals, and the idea is to kind of name them as much as to identify as many of these things as possible. What you will actually again find is that this will immediately, literally short circuit your switch off your alarm system, because you are focusing it on something else. So another thing that you can do, for example, there are things, that you can do with your body, but that's for another time for those who are interested in meditation. But sometimes, if you want to do things at the moment, another example of something that you can do, for example, is count backwards from 100 by 7. Another thing you can do is, name all your family members, their ages, and one of their favorite activities. So these are literally things that you can think of while you're sitting in a seat, like waiting to do your presentation. And that will really calm you down. that will also calm you down if you have a fear and you are in the car, for example. So this is some of the things that I'm doing with some of the young people who are entering an exam room. We they can't always do something physical, but they can think about it. And another thing that works is just name up to 10 objects around you. And these are literally therapeutic techniques and mental exercises that will shift your thinking and your fears by literally switching off, as I said, the alarm system, the amygdala. And the idea is that you try and do this as often as what you can. You can do it just before the event. You can do it, whenever you become anxious or whenever you think of that fear. And what will start to happen is, you will find if your breathing will start to regulate. Just the thought of, naming or thinking of all your families and their birth dates, for example, you will notice that the physiological responses of stress and fear in your body will calm down. You will feel grounded, and that is why it's called grounded techniques. And that's literally, I love it because I often say I'm doing brain surgery on myself literally by doing these things. And I just think that it's amazing how our brains have been, how God has created our brains. And He says that He know all of our anxious thoughts and fears. So yeah, so thank you. That's me for today. And I'm open to kind of any questions. And I think that, like as I said, some of the things that you did, because what you did, Jacques, was that once we kind of switch off the alarm system, we can use our rational brain. We can start thinking and reflecting and problem solving around the fears that we have and the goals that we want to achieve. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Shanaaz. Sure. I'm just trying to think now in terms of just matching. So what you've done is I've shared my story, and you've now attached the science to it. So, um, and what really catches my attention is reliving those memories and knowing you're reliving the memory is when you're talking about the short circuiting. Immediately it's like you're looking at what is real, even in a different, especially the 5 4 3 2 1 technique. It's not peering into a memory as if it is now real in the present. It is when you do this, or when you do this, notice your surroundings. It brings you to a place of to where you are currently. It takes you out of that space that you're in. You get locked into a memory, and the other thing that I noticed that you said over and over again, this specifically happens when you don't deal with it. So I'm just reminded, it's like, oh, Shanaaz, you should have been telling me this then, 2009. I was,
Oh,
you know
I'm sorry.
and but the reminder is, and I guess I'm talking to my then self as well, and anybody who's listening, even if you've got remarkable coping powers, is you got to deal with trauma. You got to deal with, even if you don't think it's been traumatic, is deal with it, be able to extinguish the kind of reliving of it and beginning to affect, as you say, your fight or flight, your breathing, your freeze mode, and takes away the productivity of your life. So I think, well, not I think, I'm understanding today is that the investment in your future is to deal with what happened in your past, and the quicker the better. When it does happen, try and do it acknowledge it first and foremost and deal with it. And then just the other thing that captures my imagination, oh, we're over time. So I just want to say it's such an exercise of self distraction. You're saying switching off the alarm system, and it's amazing, practical, very, very practical. It takes a consciousness. to do so, and practice makes perfect. So, Shanaaz, I mean, I think the beauty of all of this, I didn't have time to text. I was just writing as much as I can. Is to listen to the playback, listen to the uploaded podcast when we do so, and just use the techniques. You are so generously sharing the types of things that people pay a lot of money for, in terms of recovering, in terms of more than just coping, more than just surviving their environments. It's rather thriving in their current environments despite what's happened in the past, and being able to switch off the fear alarm systems very deliberately. So thank you very much. That kind of puts my own story in such context. So it's been wonderful, Shanaaz.
It's a pleasure, Jacques. Thank you. And I thought that you were explaining it so well in terms of how you go about it. I just wanted to come and kind of add the little bits of sciencey bits and psychology bits to it.
Well, I guess it dovetails so nicely. So, well, that's all, folks. And we will meet again next week. And Shanaaz, enjoy the rest of the week. And hope to actually see you soon.
Yes, thank you. And bye, everyone. Thank you, Jacques.
Bye.
Bye.